Well, for anybody who's sick of seeing this rather well-used bit of footage, it does actually come up again at the end of the video, but you'll never see it again after that because this is the final part. There's just two now remaining. So for anybody who's not seen any of these videos so far in what will now definitely be a 10-part series, 8 of those rather unkempt looking Matchbox cars that we just saw there are now complete, and there's just 2 remaining, and there's only tiny little bits of tidying here and there to do on these last 2. So taking the 1933 Plymouth first, all the paint's done. That was all it was ever really going to get because the thing itself wasn't actually in terrible condition. It just had rough paint. I didn't mention it before, but I did mask the grill off just to make it easier to leave it looking like a chrome grill. I didn't mask it as though my life depended on it, if I'm quite honest, so there's a little bit of paint got in here and there, and that's more to do with how I masked it rather than any kind of attributes of the masking tape itself. If I'd have really wanted it to be dead accurate, then I could have really pressed the masking tape in, but as you're not even really guaranteed, even if you do all that and go around it with a scalpel blade and things like that, not only will it be quite a long fiddly job, you're not absolutely guaranteed to prevent any ingress of paint onto the grill itself, and it's really an easier job just to do this and just get a scalpel blade and just gently manage off any of the paint that's crept onto the area that you don't want painting. The masking tape, I mean, I could have just scraped the whole thing back to being bare metal again and just not bother with any masking tape at all and left the grill to just get completely painted along with the rest. The strip of masking tape was just there to save a little bit of this. Now, it's not really a mammoth task. I'm not going to try and say that this is like a really difficult or lengthy task, although I am making it look probably harder and longer and more complicated than it is just by the sheer amount of footage there is of doing this. But I've said this before, if something's worth demonstrating, there's no point just showing 2 seconds of it where nobody can really see what you're doing. I know there's a risk of, well, not losing viewers, but failing to attract them in the first place by not having sort of snappy, punchy, sensationalist-looking videos where everything happens in 5 seconds, but they're pointless in my eyes because it's just a case of, look what I've done, how do you do it? I'm not telling you. So this might be a slightly lengthy watch, but it's not as lengthy as it could have been. There's quite a lot of footage of this, and I did cut it. But you can clearly see what I'm doing there. It's just a case of very, very, very carefully just going into the grooves of the grill that have got any kind of excess paint on there, and then around the edge as well, because looking at pictures of this car, it's one of the few cars where the kind of radiator, the shell, the surround of the radiator grill isn't actually chromed, it's body colour, but there is a thin chrome outline going around the bars of the grill, so that's just what I wanted to bring out. That was the bit that I had to be really careful with there, and I'm giving it some eyes. As it was, the real car looks to have quite very narrow headlights. It's not got like the big round headlights that you usually get on cars from this kind of era. But Matchbox gave it none. Or maybe they did. Maybe when this was absolutely brand new, maybe it did have some little headlights painted on. But either way, I just thought I'm putting them back using some liquid chrome. I'm not having this. It's got to have a face. And I was tempted just to put a chrome centre trim on like the spare wheel cover, but I thought no, it doesn't need it, and it's just something to get wrong at this late stage. So just using a file to bore out the holes in the base plate for it to fit back together properly. Onto the taxi, I'd ostensibly done the wheels, but when I looked, they weren't very good. There were still some areas where the chrome was missing, so I'm just going over all 4 of them with the liquid chrome just to finish those off properly. It's just the kind of thing that happens when you're doing 10 at once. Sometimes you'll rush certain things because, especially if you're like me and you like to just move on with things and get things going and get things done, impatient you might say, you will often find that you've made a bit of a Friday afternoon just about to knock off job out of some of the stuff, so you just go back over it and just do it again properly. As long as you don't mess up anything really fundamental, it doesn't really matter if you rush 1 or 2 of the details and you just haven't done them enough. You can just go back later and do them again. It's the things like the actual paint itself that you don't want to rush, which funnily enough I did with this taxi the first time around, and that's why I had to do it again. I thought about cutting some of this, like the wheels have just been finished off, and then I thought, well no, the more you show of this, the better. This is how it's actually done. And anyway, it gives me a chance to prepare for the next segment, which might seem slightly unorthodox, might seem a little bit like a bodge. But the other thing that's outstanding is there's some areas missing from when I opened the doors for the first time. Now that's just a red permanent marker on some foil. And you can see how you actually get the same effect from that as you do from the Spectraflame style paint, because permanent red markers are transparent, and they could actually be, you could in theory mirror polish a body and completely make it sort of Spectraflame red just using a red marker. But at the same time you can't, because you'll see all the lines, all the brush marks in the finish, so it's not really viable. It can be done in a pinch if you really haven't got an airbrush and you really want to Spectraflame something, then yeah, you sort of can, but it won't look factory, it won't look right. I mean, I don't just mess about with airbrushes and relatively expensive transparent paint just for no reason. I don't really do anything just for no reason. You'll notice that I try and keep expense and especially equipment to a minimum. But the nature of the red marker itself, it's perfectly durable. Once it's on there, it's on, it's staying on. So although you can't go across, say, a roof with it and get a good result, it's perfect for touching in. Different colours, it might be more difficult because permanent markers don't tend to come in that many different colours, although they probably do now. But certainly for the tiny little bits of exposed metal, like around the edges of the doors, not actually on the surface, not on the bit of the door that you actually see when it's closed, but just the edges of the door itself and the edges of where the door actually shuts into, that's absolutely fine. The glass unit, I was just looking at it and I just happened to notice that it's the only one I've come across where the rear window's wider than the front. But I suppose that's because it's a taxi, the one, I don't know, maybe the thing's probably wider in the back than it is in the front, just because it's like a purpose-built taxi and there's only going to ever be one person in the front. So this is it, they're both done. You could say they both crossed the line at the same time, or you could say the Plymouth was completed just before the taxi, so making the taxi the final one. So from now on, it's all just going to be nice shots of the finished cars, not just these two, but everything that we've done so far, because this is like a sort of omnibus, sort of built onto the end of it. But yeah, there's going to be quite a few shots. I mean, there's no point not having lots of shots. I've seen other YouTubers. There's one in particular that I really like. I think he's called Diecast Resurrection. I love the stuff that he does with the old Hot Wheels Redlines from the late 60s. He really does do some incredible things with those. His colours are amazing, and the paint finish that he gets. But in a lot of the videos, he only shows the thing for like 3 seconds and then it's over. And I'd just show a bit more of it. So I'm kind of overcompensating by just possibly showing too much of these, really. But you can always, the thing is, you can always just stop. If you've seen enough of them, you can just stop. Whereas if I don't show you enough of them in the first place, if I haven't actually filmed it, you can't see any more of it. You don't have the option that way. So this is just a sensible precautionary measure to make sure that everybody gets to see enough of the final result, or as much of the final result as they possibly want. So no more sanding, no more filing, no more messing about with glass, no more painting, no more airbrushing. Everything's all done for all 10 cars. The work's not quite over for me, or rather, this being a voiceover, the work wasn't quite all over for me. I managed to find an original 1980s Matchbox Motor City in a charity shop for £1. It's not complete, there's quite a few bits missing, but I've set it all up. Well, I've set it up the best I can, given the fact that some of the pieces were missing or broken, and I can't really be sure what's missing and what isn't. I did say that the Tamika service station, that lovely little thing, but it was at full capacity when we managed to get the 8 of them on there at a pinch in the last episode. So I did this for the final 10, so it's like an original Matchbox Motor City, but just with some original Matchbox, mostly from the 1980s. Alright, one or two of them aren't quite within the period. Funnily enough, like I said before, the one that represents the oldest car here is the newest the Plymouth. It's the newest casting, but it's quite conceivable that some kid could have still been playing about with one of these in 2011 or whenever that Plymouth was made. But the rest of them are all period accurate, but just not colour accurate. You just would never have seen these colours on a Motor City. Well, apart from maybe in a different dimension where Matchbox have made some different colour decisions, but then they'd probably have made some different colour decisions with the Motor City itself. So a bit of a departure there for the last episode. You've always got to pull the stops out a little bit for the last episode. I mean, some people might question me using that phrase to describe spending £1 on something that Took me, I don't know, maybe about half an hour, if that, to set up. I didn't even do it properly. Look, that junction there, that just goes to absolutely nothing. So what I've also got coming up, anybody who's watched all these so far will be pleased to know that that same bit of footage of the original 10 is getting one last outing, but this time with a little bit of context. I also thought it'd be nice just to have some comparison shots of all 10 throughout, so I can reminisce on the Ferrari that looked like it was going to be really difficult and ended up being the first one finished. The Trans Am that looked like it wasn't going to be difficult and wasn't. The Group C that really wasn't that bad to start with, it was just a bit scabby, so that wasn't particularly difficult either. And the Di Tommaso Pantera, which, if I'm perfectly honest, wasn't massively difficult. The Ford RS200 with its slightly experimental for me, using the enamel instead of the Tamiya clear acrylics, using the enamel transparent paint and enamel lacquer over the top with pretty good results. And the Serena, that took a bit to get that green actually looking like that. There was a few problems with getting the actual paint itself on. The Sterling, which, like I say, is just an advert for why mirror polishing is a really good idea. The Sierra gave us some trouble, if we remember, but it got there in the end. I like how doing the bottom half silver actually weirdly gives the headlights some depth, because you can sort of see a bit of the inside of the silver through them. The London Taxi, which I've very, very enthusiastically cracked on with, and that was to my downfall. That's why it had to be done again. And then the Plymouth, which was just an example of how slow and steady doesn't win the race, because it arguably was the last one to be finished. So this is the infamous shot of the original 10, but now next to a shot of what they all look like now. Not sure if it's the same box. It could be. I do tend to keep these about. They are handy. So that brings this little adventure to a conclusion. All 10 are done. All 10 turned out in a way that I'm happy with. I don't think there's anything that really needs revisiting or redoing. So what comes next? This. Thanks for watching, and I would like to think that you'll join me for this lot.